Tavshin Pei Daled. We will begin Parak Lamed Zayin, chapter 37, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Vayeishev Yaakov Eretz Megurei Aviv Eretz Canaan, and Yaakov lived in the land of the sojournings of his father, in the land of Canaan. Eila Toldos Yaakov. These are the offspring of Yaakov. Vayeishev ben Shvei Shana, Vayeishev at the age of 17 years. Hayeroyes Echo Batzayin, which shepherded the sheep with his brothers. V'hunar, and he was a lad, Espnei Bilav and Espnei Zilpah Neshei Aviv, the sons of Bilah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Yosef brought their bad report to their father. Okay, we're not going to go through, those psukim in depth right now, but we're going to focus on the next pasuk, the next verse. Yisrael loved Yosef from all his sons, because he was a son of his old age. And he made for him what Rashi translates as a fine woolen tunic, a fine woolen coat. I guess it's a medrash that says it was multicolored. Everybody knows about Yosef's multicolored coat. But according to Rashi, Ksenes Pasa means a coat or a tunic made of fine wool. And then the pasuk says, "Vayiru echav ki oisav aviyam mikol echav," and the brothers saw that their father loved him from the rest of the brothers. Vayisnu oisai, and they hated him. Vayachlu daber l'shalayim, they could not speak with him peacefully. Okay, now we're not going to go this year into the whole question about what was going on between Yosef and his brothers. That's not this year's focus. We want to focus on a detail. And the detail is the words Kiven Zekunim Hulo. The pasuk says Yisrael loved Yosef from all his sons because he was a ben Zekunim. And there was something about him being a ben Zekunim that made him loved more than the other sons. And because of the fact that the brothers saw that he was more loved than they were, which again the pasuk is saying has to do with him being a son of his old age, that was a cause for the animosity between them. So what is the meaning of these words, ben Zekunim, a son of his old age? So simply put, it means Yaakov was older when Yosef was born. And when you have a child at an older age, it's something very special. There's a special connection there. In Yiddish, there's a saying called ben Zekunim or bas Zekunim. When a child is born, when the parents are already, older, so to speak, older, and maybe already at an age that you'd expect that they wouldn't be having children anymore. They still have a child. To ben Zekunim, a son of an old age, a daughter of an old age, they have a special place, and that was the case with Yosef. But Rashi actually doesn't stop there. Rashi brings down ben Zekunim, Shenoyla la'esek nasai. Yosef was born to Yaakov's old age. The Unkelis Tirgame, Unkelis is the Aramaic translation that we have on the sides of the height of the Chumash. And Unkelis was his name. He was actually a convert, a Roman convert, and his translation is not only a translation; it's very often commentary also. It's woven into the translation. So Rashi brings down V'unkelis Tirgame, and Unkelis translates Bar Chakim Hulei. He was a son of wisdom to him, which means that according to Unkelis, that the word Kiben Zekunim doesn't mean a son of an old age, but rather we use the word Zakein or Zekunim, which literally translated means old, but we also know that a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, is called a Zakein. And it doesn't have to be old. A person who's a Torah scholar can be called a Zakein. And therefore, in this context also, Zakein here means wise. So Yisrael loved Yosef mikol banav because he was bar chakim hulei. He was a wise son to him. He possessed the greatest wisdom. He was the wisest of the sons. And because of that, he loved him. He had a special love towards him. Now, Yaakov Kamenetsky points out the following. Anytime, there's a lot of, we don't always go into it ourselves in this class, but very often, whenever you're dealing with Rashi's commentary or any of the commentaries, just that Rashi doesn't always speak it out, But there's always a question that's coming to be answered. There's something in the commentary, something in the words of the Torah that have a question or that are open to a question, and Rashi answers it. And sometimes it's, Rashi's just telling us the interpretation. But the fact that Rashi is bringing the first interpretation, which is what we call the Pshat, the simple interpretation. Zaki means older. Now Rashi brings Unkelis. So why did Rashi bring Unkelis? What was the point of Rashi including Unkelis in his commentary? Because clearly Unkelis, the fact that he translated the words not as the son of his old age, but a wise son, it means that Unkelis had a reason why he wasn't following that more seemingly basic interpretation. There was something bothering him that therefore said he's not going to follow the simple interpretation of the word. He's going to give it another interpretation that's not outside of the pshat. It's not beyond the a basic interpretation, but it wouldn't have been the first one that you would have said. So why did Unkelis do that? So there's one way of saying it, which Rebecca Kamenetsky doesn't mention. But if I were to tell you that Yaakov had a special place in his heart for Yosef because Yosef was born in his old age, what's the obvious question? There's an obvious question on that. Yosef is most loved because he's born to Yaakov's old age. Question.
What question?
I'm asking you. Ask a question.
Why he loves Yosef?
If the Pasuk says he loves Yosef because he was born to his old age, there should be a question on that.
Because he last one.
Huh?
He was the last one, the smallest.
Was Yosef the last one?
No.
Benjamin was.
No, but he didn't know about it.
Excuse me? Benjamin's born already. Benjamin is born already here at this point in time.
Benjamin was born.
Benjamin at this point in time is born already.
But he mentioned about
Benjamin was born on the way to Israel, and now that's where they are.
okay.
So Benjamin's already born.
The question why he didn't
So the question is, if the point of Yosef's love is because he's born at old age, Benjamin was even older.
How old is Benjamin at this time?
I don't know.
But he was born.
I don't know.
But
But if Yosef is 17 now,
Yeah.
Benjamin is probably, he's not 1 year old. It wasn't that long after Yosef was born. Maybe we can even make a calculation. When Yosef was born, Yaakov wanted to go back to Yitzchak. Lavan says stay. He stays for 6 more years.
6 years, was it?
Yeah, 6 years. And then he goes back. And on the way back, Benjamin is born. Okay? That means this is around 11 years later.
Wait, so how old is Joseph when he started back?
When who started back?
When Yaakov started heading back?
It would seem he was like 6. So it seemed to me,
wow,
based on the calculation, if when Yosef was born, that's when Laban told Yaakov to stick around, and Yaakov stuck around for 6 years, and then he left. It would seem to me that Yosef was around 6,
Joseph is 6.
and now he's 17.
Now he's 17. So that's
11 years later. So Benjamin by now was 11 years old.
wow. I always believe he was born late after this.
No.
okay. So an 11-year-old can be pretty lovable, but
Pretty level.
yeah.
So the question is, and don't forget, they're a lot more mature than our 11-year-olds were.
Well, 11-year-old, you're not changing the diapers.
I mean, but I'm also saying that, an 11-year-old, especially in those days, was a more mature 11-year-old, and he wasn't just a little kid. So the point, so there seems to be that question about the fact that, Benjamin's younger. So that could be one reason. That could be one point of what is bothering the Unkelis, that's why he didn't learn it that way. But Yaakov Kamenetsky doesn't bring out that point. He says that he brings out a different point. He brings out a point that if Yosef is loved by Yaakov because he was born at his old age, let's say Yosef especially loved because Yosef was the youngest for a while. Yosef was the youngest for a while before Benjamin was born. So Yosef had that status of the youngest for a while, and that kind of stuck. Let's just say, okay? So Rabbi Kamenetsky says, but still, that shouldn't be a cause of jealousy. In every family, you've got a youngest child. In every family, you've got a youngest child. And youngest children, at the end of the day, everybody knows there's a special place for the youngest child. That's the way it is.
But they all like him. The youngest.
But that's the way it is.
Not just the father. They all like him. The youngest.
Whatever you want to call it. But the point is, if the Yosef has that status, so fine, add that to the point. Everybody should have a special place for him. And it's a very normal thing that the youngest child has a special place by the parents. And even if the other children like make fun of it, at the end of the day, it's just a normal, accepted fact. He was born this way. It's a natural, normal thing. He was born this way. He was born the youngest. It's a regular thing that people that parents have a special place in their heart for it. So why would that be a cause of jealousy? Therefore, says the Onkelos, the explanation of Ben Zakunim is not that he's the son of an old age, but he's the son of wisdom. He was the wisest. Okay, once you're talking about a quality of wisdom, and because of that, because Yosef is the wisest, that's why the father loves him the most. The other brothers aren't shabby either. That already has more place for jealousy. When you're talking about, because one of them is the wisest over the other ones, that can lead more to jealousy. And therefore, the Onkelos said it means that. But actually, Rashi doesn't stop there. Because the Onkelos doesn't say all this, but Rashi adds to what Onkelos says. When Rashi continues, after he brings out Onkelos Tirgim Bar Chakim Hulei, that he was a son of wisdom to him, Rashi adds, and seemingly is interpreting what the Onkelos means, Kol shalom mishem ve'ever masar loy. Whatever Yaakov had studied under the two scholars named Shem and Aver, this is what he gave over to Yosef. Now we need some background. In Parshas told us, Yaakov takes the blessings instead of Esav. Esav wants to kill him for it, right? Rachel says to Yaakov, Rachel says to Yitzchak, Yaakov's got to leave. And she tells Yitzchak he's got to leave in order to find a wife. And Yitzchak tells him to go. Okay? Yaakov goes, he leaves Beersheba, that's where they're living, and he goes to Haran. The Medrash tells us that before Yaakov actually left for Haran, he made a stop. He went to stop at what was called Yeshivas Shem ve'Aver. He went to study at the academy of Shem and Aver. Who was Shem? Shem was one of Noach's sons, right? Noach had 3 sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Shem had I think Aver was his great-grandson. He had a great-grandson, Aver. They were both righteous men, and they had a yeshiva. They had an academy of learning. And actually, Shem and Aver had their academy of learning, not in a very, not in the best of times. Most people were idol worshippers then. They and their academy were the few that were dedicated in serving Hashem. But they had this yeshiva, this academy of Shem and Aver. And Yaakov, before he went to Haran, stopped there and learned there for how many years? 14. 14 years he stayed there.
Without ever sleeping.
Correct. Well, without ever sleeping regularly. And it was after those 14 years that then he went to Haran, and then he had to dream with the ladder, etc. Okay? So Rashi tells us that when we say that Yaakov loved Yosef as the wisest son, what that practically means is that whatever he studied in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, he taught that to Yosef. Yosef, being that son of wisdom, means that Yosef was taught a particular wisdom. The wisdom that Yaakov had studied under Shem and Aver, he passed that on to Yosef. And to Yosef only. And that, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, is what caused the brothers to be jealous. Because the brothers realized that Yaakov was teaching him something that not to them. That was the love. That was the special treatment that Yaakov was giving Yosef. And that caused them jealousy. Now, let's try to understand a little bit more. What does this mean? That whatever Yaakov has learned from Shem and Aver, he passed on to Yosef. Did Yaakov only study Torah by Shem and Aver? No. Yaakov, before he even left his house, was called Yaakov was Ish Ohalim, the man of the tent. He wasn't going out in the field. It wasn't going out in the forest and hunting animals like Esav. He was sitting in tents. Which tents? The tents of Torah. Who did Yaakov learn Torah from? Who do you think he learned Torah from?
Father.
His father, his grandfather. Okay? But for some reason, before he left, he had to stop at Shem Ve'ever. Why? What was so special about that? And why was he passing that on to Yosef and not to his other children? I mean, Yaakov taught Torah to all his children. For some reason, there is this Torah of Shem and Aver that's different or unique to the Torah that Yaakov studied under Avram and Yitzchak. And the Torah of Avram and Yitzchak, he passed on. We can assume he did teach his other sons. But this particular Torah of Shem Be'er, he didn't. Why? So Rakamanetsky explains like this, and I will try to explain it to you the way I understand it. But I'll tell you the way he says it. He says that the Torah that Yaakov studied in Shem Ve'ever, he calls it the Torah of Gullus, the Torah of exile. That means that your idea that before Yaakov himself went into exile, he had to study the Torah of exile that was the Torah taught by Shem and Aver. Why were Shem and Aver why were they teaching the Torah of exile? Because Shem and Aver, their lives were always lives where they were surrounded by wicked people. They never were really, besides maybe in the Ark, they never were in an environment that was very conducive to serving Hashem. First, Shem went through the generation of the flood. And then after the generation of the flood, you had the Tower of Babel, and you had idol worship. Shem and Aver lived through very difficult times. And nonetheless, even in those difficult times, in those times when they were hostile to the service of Hashem and to Torah, nonetheless, Shem and Aver still stayed dedicated. They had developed therefore, they had a Torah of Gullus. They had a Torah of, they were able to teach how is it that you can be able to survive in a hostile environment. And Yaakov needed that, because now Yaakov was going to Lavan. He was going to live by Lavan. That was an environment that was completely antithetical to anything that Yaakov had by his father Yitzchak, by his grandfather Avraham. And therefore, he needed to go and study that special Torah of Shem and Aver before he went into exile. Now, what does it mean? Now, this is my addition. What does it mean? You have to learn what's this Torah of exile? Exactly, that Yaakov was learning. What did it mean? What does Rabbi Kamenetsky mean when he says you have to learn the Torah of exile by Shem and Aver? What is that? Is it a parsha in the Torah? Is it a tractate in Talmud? What does it mean? What does it mean? Derech Eretz. That's how you survive in exile?
That's how you survive everywhere.
Okay, but there was something special about Shem and Aver to teach him something he needed in exile. So what exactly, and if you say it's Derech Eretz, what unique Derech Eretz was it? So maybe it is something like that, but what does it mean? So I gotta be honest with you, I used to think that what it meant was, and I don't think this is what it means, but I'll just share what I thought. I thought it meant that it wasn't a different Torah specifically, but rather what it meant is that, it was a question of who your Rebbe is. Meaning, by learning by Shem and Aver, Yaakov Avinu would basically be inspired and taught by people who roughed it. Avram roughed it, but after a while, Avram developed around himself an entire enclave of students, and there was Beis Avram. There was Avram's house. Avram had his own place. He developed his own place that was like the Beis Hamikdash, the Ramban says. Yitzchak was the same. Shem and Aver, they never had that. And therefore, Shem and Aver, they experienced, and it's like, I'll use the term, Yaakov was hearing war stories from Shem and Aver. He was hearing all the terrible things that Shem and Aver would tell him about all the terrible things that happened and how they dealt with it. And these would be experiences that Yaakov would be able to study from. Or the mere fact that Yaakov was studying from people who went through that would impress him, would inspire him, or would even put within him the strength to be able to deal with being by Lavan. So it's not a particular Torah, but it's a kind of an experience. But I don't think that's what it means, because then but Rashi here says that Yaakov taught this to Yosef, not to the other brothers. So what was he telling Yosef? Stories? What was he telling him? Stories?
Maybe stories also.
I'm saying also, but that whole thing with stories, what exactly is this Torah that he's passing on, that he learned from Aver, that he's passing on to Yosef? So I'm going to suggest something. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense, but maybe it means something like this. I'm going to call it Kabbalah. I'm going to call it Kabbalah. I'm going to call it secrets of the Torah. That means that Shem and Aver, in their ability to be able to survive the environment that they were in, they had gleaned from the Torah certain what we call secrets of the Torah, certain deep lessons that lie in the Torah, that when you have those lessons and you understand those concepts, that helps you get through Galus. It's a Kabbalistic power. It's a Kabbalistic strength. It's something that lies in the Torah, like Kabbalah. It's called the secrets of Torah. And in the secrets of Torah, there are those secrets that help you to be able to survive in exile. And Shem the Aver, because they were able to I use the word develop. They were able, they had those secrets. They had studied, they were able to glean those secrets from the Torah. They had the wisdom of those secret Kabbalistic concepts, and they used them to be able to survive exile. And that is what they gave Yaakov. Yaakov took those concepts from Shem and Aver, and that's how he was able to survive by Lavan. Okay, if you accept that, so I would say that now, what is he doing by Yosef? He's giving those concepts to Yosef. Now, Rabbi Yaakov explains, why is he, whatever way you can understand this Torah of Shem and Aver, why is he teaching it to Yosef? And Rabbi Yaakov explains, because Yaakov understood that eventually his descendants are going into exile. Hashem told Avraham by the Bris Ben Abasarim, he told Avraham, you shall know that for 400 years your children will be in a land that is not theirs, and they will be enslaved, and they will be inflicted. Yaakov knows that the descendants of Avraham have to go into Golus, have to go into exile, and they're going to have to know how to survive in exile. And therefore Yaakov says, one of my sons I know is going to be that leader. He's going to be that leader who is going to lead them in exile. And therefore, he needs to know these concepts. And who was that? Yosef. Because Yaakov already recognized on Yosef leadership qualities. He made Yosef a leader. He recognized leadership qualities. Yosef's dreams of being a king weren't just daydreams. They were dreams for a reason. Yosef had the qualities of a king, and he was meant to have the qualities of a king and be a king. Now, it doesn't say that Yaakov knew that Yosef was going to be, doesn't mean Yaakov knew that Yosef was going to be taken his brothers were going to take him, sell him as a slave, and now from a slave become the king of Egypt. That's not what Yaakov, he didn't know those specifics. But he understood that the future of his descendants are to be in exile. If they're in exile, they need someone who's going to have the wisdom of exile to be able to establish a situation where Yaakov's descendants can survive in exile. And Yaakov knew that was Yosef. Because Yosef was the wisest of his sons, Yosef would be the one who, again, according to my interpretation, Yosef would be the one who could understand these concepts, because not everybody can always understand the concepts of the secrets of the Torah. Yosef could understand those concepts, and Yosef would be the one with his qualities of leadership to be the one that would have those concepts and lead the Jewish people in exile. So Yaakov is teaching Yosef the Torah Shem Ve'aver because he already knows that Yosef is going to be that leader in exile. But the brothers see it. The brothers see that he's being treated with a special Torah that they're not getting, and that is what developed that was part of the basis of their jealousy. But Yaakov taught it to Yosef. He gave Yosef this special wisdom, either because of the fact that maybe he understood Yosef could actually grasp it, or again, and plus the fact that Yosef has these leadership qualities, and he's going to be the one to lead them in the future in exile, wherever it is. He doesn't know where it is yet. But Yosef is going to be the one that's going to be able to establish the Jewish people's survival in exile, as Yaakov survived, as Shem and Aver survived, because it was the Torah, Shem, the Aver that gives you the ability to do that. Yaakov had it and survived with it, and now passed it on to Yosef to help his descendants survive with it. And eventually Yosef did that. Yosef went to Egypt, and he brought everybody down to Egypt, and Yosef was preparing the way for them in Egypt. And according to this, part of the way that he prepared for them to be in Egypt, and part of the way he prepared for them to survive Egypt, was the fact that he had that Torah of Shem V'Aver that his father taught him, by which to be able to survive in exile. It helped him survive in exile, and it helped him establish how Yaakov's descendants could survive in exile. So perhaps that's what lies in this Rashi.
That means Yaakov saw in Joseph something what nobody saw.
Well, the other brothers, who's nobody? The other brothers?
The brothers.
The brothers saw it, but the brothers felt either their jealousy tainted how they saw it, and the brothers may have seen it, but they held that Yosef was misusing it.
Because it's from stories, there is no anything Joseph special if in as wisdom.
No, that's what it means, Ben Zakunim. According to Onkelos and Rashi, that's what Ben Zakunim means.
Yaakov saw something the brother did not see.
Or the brothers saw it and they were jealous, or the brothers saw it and felt that Yosef was not using it right. Yosef was using it to dominate them. That's how they saw it. Okay. Let's see if we can get in one more thing. All right. Here we go. Let's turn to Perek Lamed Zayin, chapter 37, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, verse 21. So at this point, the brothers have taken Yosef, they threw him in it, and they wanted to kill him. So Pasuk Chaf Aleph, verse 21 reads, Vayishma Reuven ve'atzileo miyadam. Reuven heard, and he saved him from their hands. Vayemer lanakenu nafesh, and he said, let's not kill him. Vayemer lem Reuven al tishbechu dam. Reuven said to them, do not spill blood. Hashlichu Vayeser labar hazeh asher b'midbar. Throw him into this pit that's in the desert. V'yer al tishlechu vay. And do not don't put your hands on him. Why was Reuven doing this? In order to save them from their hands, to bring him back to his father. So the other brothers, as many of the commentaries point out, the brothers made a halakhic decision that Yosef deserves to be put to death. And Reuven had to follow the majority. But Reuven still wanted to try to save him. And he couldn't just outright save him. So he says to the brothers, instead of directly killing him, why do we have to lay our hands on him? Throw him into the pit and he'll die there. But Reuven's hopes were that he would actually come back later and bring him back to his father. So there's a medrash that says the following. The medrash, these are the words in the medrash. If Reuven would have known that the Torah is going to say that Reuven did this in order to bring him back to his father, if Reuven would have known that Torah is going to publicize that he did this to bring him back to his father, he would have put Yosef on his shoulders and carried him home. That's what Medrash says. And that sounds a bit, that doesn't sound right. It sounds like we're saying if Reuven would have known the publicity he's getting for this, he would have done it better. Another example that the Medrash says, there's two examples. I'm just going to mention the third example now. That later on in the book of Rus, where Rus, the Moabite convert, comes back to Eretz Yisrael, she's gleaning in a field, and she meets Boaz, and Boaz praises her for all the kindness she showed to her mother-in-law. Boaz invites her to come and eat, and it says that Boaz roasted some kernels for her and passed it to her. So the Medrash says, if Boaz would have known that the Torah is going to say this, he would have sent her a stuffed goose, a stuffed chicken. Not just give her these grains, these little grains, but he'd given her a stuffed chicken. Again, it sounds like if Boaz would know that he's going to get publicity for this, then he really would have done it right. That doesn't sound right. And the Medrash actually says that a person, when you do a mitzvah, do it with a leiv sameach, do it with a full heart. Meaning do it wholeheartedly and do it the best that you can. Because if Reuben would have known that the Torah would say that that he did it to save his brother, he would have taken him home. What does this all mean? So Rabbi Kamenetsky explains in the following way. This is the way I understand it. Explains like this. When Reuben, saw the situation that they wanted to kill their brother. So Reuben couldn't just say, guys, I'm taking him home. Nothing's happening. He couldn't do that. The brothers had rendered a halachic decision. Somehow or another, he felt he could somehow or another subvert it, but he couldn't do it immediately. He couldn't do it directly. So he says, put him in the pit. And the plan and the hopes and the plan was he'll come back when they don't see him, bring him back home. So Reuven, when he went ahead and he did this, he wasn't a prophet, and he could only see what was in front of him. And Reuven didn't realize that actually, when the Torah says that Reuven wanted to bring him back to his father, what's the Torah telling us? The Torah is telling us that if Reuven would have had his way, this entire mess with Yosef, this entire business with Yosef wouldn't have come about. It wouldn't have happened. It was because of the fact that his plans were messed up. Because by the time he came back, they decided to sell him. That's why everything with Yosef came about. But actually, the Torah telling us that Reuven did this to bring him back to his father was actually the way of the Torah. Torah is actually saying that if Reuven wanted to bring him back, and if Reuven would have brought him back, everything that were about to happen wouldn't have happened. Everything with Yosef in Egypt would never have happened. That means that what Reuven wanted to do would have had historic ramifications. It would have changed the course of history. It would have made a tremendous difference in everything. It didn't happen. But Reuven didn't know that. Reuven looked what was happening to his brother, and he wanted to save his brother, and this was his plan. Did Reuven know what kind of a real difference it would make? Did Reuven know the future ramifications of this? He didn't. And the Medrash says if he would have, what he would have done? He would have told to the brothers, forget it. And he would have grabbed grabbed Yosef, put him on his shoulder, and ran. Because if Reuben would understand the ramifications of what's happening by him, he would have done it full, but he didn't know. And that's why he didn't do it. When Boaz gave that little bit of food to Rus, right? So he thought he was being kind with this poor convert. Actually, what was he doing? He was actually developing the fact that soon he would marry her. What the book of Rus is telling us, and it tells us about this part of the episode, is that by being so nice to Rus and being so giving to Rus, Nami, later on, when Rus came back, Nami said, you know what? He's the guy who should be marrying you. He's the man who should be marrying you. Boaz, by the way he was acting towards Rus, he was actually already developing the future between them. And what was that future between them going to bring? It was going to bring David HaMelech, King David. It was going to bring Mashiach, who comes from the family of David HaMelech. But he didn't know that. He just thought he's being nice to this woman. And therefore, you know what he gave her? He gave her some food. If he would have known that right now what he's doing is he's developing the future of the Jewish people, then he would have developed that he would have done that in a whole different way. Because if he would understand the full ramification of what it's about, he would do it in the manner that illustrates that represents that. But he didn't know. How was he supposed to know? He didn't know. When the Medrash says, do a mitzvah in its fullest, because look at Reuben and look at Boaz, What the Medrash is saying is Reuben and Boaz did not fully understand the ramifications of their actions. And if they would have done it in a whole different way. So you know what? When you do a mitzvah, your mitzvah may have ramifications for the future of the Jewish people that you have no idea about right now. Any mitzvah you could be doing can and maybe will have ramifications for the future of the Jewish people. And therefore, you know what? Do every mitzvah in its fullest. Because that mitzvah that you're doing could change history. These people didn't realize that. That's why they did it on their level. But from their actions, the Torah is saying, learn that, understand that any mitzvah that you're doing could change the course of history. It can make a tremendous difference in people's lives for generations to come. And the Medrash there concludes, it used to be that when a person would do a mitzvah, it would be inscribed, it would be written by a Navi, by a prophet. The Torah, the books of Tanakh, of the books of Nach. Now Medrash says, and who writes down the mitzvah now? Who writes them down now? Medrash answers, Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet, writes it, Umelech HaMashiach, and the soul of Mashiach seals it. That means to say, as Rabbi Yaakov says, that any mitzvah you do can make a difference in Jewish history. And therefore, knowing that and seeing that from these stories in the Torah, make sure you do every mitzvah with a joyful heart. It means you do it to its fullest. Because that mitzvah that you're doing can make a tremendous difference. And therefore, do it to its fullest so it can really have the full effect that it could have. And I'm just going to share, I was trying to think of an example of this. I'm sure there are many examples of this. But one example can be, there was a woman, her name was Sarah Schneerer. Sarah Schneerer was a young woman who actually developed one of the first organized educational systems or schools for girls. At the point of times, girls did not have any kind of organized Jewish education.
Where?
In Europe, years back, in the beginning of the 20th century, earlier than that, I remember exactly the years that she started. But she went ahead and she saw that the young Jewish women, they need to have a formal Jewish education. It cannot continue without it. And she went to different, and for years that was not practice. You girls learned by their mothers. That's where they got their wisdom from. That's where they got their Judaism from. The Jewish education came from the home. But the problem was that a lot of homes were affected in negative ways. And therefore, she approached different rabbis. At first, they didn't support her, but then they did support her wholeheartedly. And she developed, and her first school was called Beis Yaakov. And that's why many girls' schools are called Beis Yaakov, because they're all basically following, her idea. Now, I can't say this for sure, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere. What inspired her to do this? She was a young woman, a simple young woman from a town. What got her to do this? What inspired her to become so seeking of Torah knowledge and feeling that this has to now be spread more amongst the girls in order for them to remain Jewish, and to remain loyal to Torah? What inspired her? And I think I read somewhere it inspired her was her local rabbi. And the local rabbi was a rabbi. He was a small town, but he was a Torah scholar. He was supposed to be an excellent speaker, an excellent orator, and he gave very inspiring drashas on Shabbos. And she was very inspired by that. And that is what got her into this whole mode of now trying to spread this amongst other women. So here was this rabbi, right, giving drashas. And again, it seemed like it was a small town, it was a little town, and, he gets up and he speaks, and he speaks, right? And he's got a small crowd, a simple crowd, he could decide, all right, here's these people, I'll speak to them, fine, good. But at the same time, did this rabbi realize that he had an effect on one woman who would change the course of Jewish history? He didn't realize that. But at the end, he did it. He accomplished that without realizing it, but he accomplished that. And I'm sure that there's so many other examples of that. So many different examples of that. But at the end of the day, the point is that you don't know what your actions, what kind of effect your actions could have. And therefore, do the action the best that you can, because then it will be able to have the fullest ramification that it can have, and the fullest effect. Have a wonderful evening.